We grew up with a measure twice, cut once. That was an old sort of joinery term. But now you look at what you have in the way of technology and the technology that's available to you. You can plan, design and deliver before you've even broken soil. Again, that sort of being able to use 4D, 5D products such as Synchro really does make a difference in planning out and removing those errors, removing those mistakes.
Are you interested in digital transformation? What do you think about the phrase, we've got to start making projects shovel-worthy instead of shovel-ready? How can we find and create the magic we are looking for in the work we are avoiding? Stay tuned for answers from Mark Coates.
What is the future for cities? Do you want to learn more about them? Do you want to know how others think about them? Do you want to be part of the conversation? Then this is the right place.
Welcome to What is the Future for Cities podcast. Today I will interview Mark Coates, Vice President of Infrastructure Policy Advancement at Bentley Systems. We will talk about his vision for the future of cities, digital transformation, the next generation, crisis management, and many more. So let's start with a proper introduction. Mark Coates is the Vice President of Infrastructure Policy Advancement at Bentley Systems, where he advises global policymakers and business leaders on sustainable, high-quality infrastructure projects, emphasizing digital adoption for lasting benefits. As a seasoned leader with over 35 years in construction and infrastructure, Mark specializing in digital transformation and smart cities. A former quantity surveyor, Mark has collaborated with major clients like Thames Water, Highways England, and Crossrail. He holds fellowships with the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation and the Chartered Institution of Civil Engineering Surveyors, where he is also a trustee. Currently, he chairs the British Water International Forum and serves on key advisory boards, including the UK's Digital Twin Hub. And with that, Mark, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. I highly appreciate your appearance on the podcast. And let's jump right in. First, I would like to understand, what do you mean by the term city?
For me, and I look at a very murky, cloudy London, a city is the biggest sort of, the English phrase I would use is a hodgepodge of environment, because you go from everything from being sat here in Bentley's headquarters in London in the square mile, to a shopping centre, to a home, to an education, to a health authority. It is absolutely the most all-encompassing aspect of life is catered for in one very, if you look at the size of the planet compared to our cities, it's a very small microcosm of connections and people, interaction between not only the built environment, but the human environment as well.
So, you are now in London. Last time we spoke, you were in your very small community in the rural part of London.
Oxford, part of Oxford.
We were also discussing the city, and I would love to understand, what is the limit of the city for you? Because you are experiencing, I would say, the two end of the spectrum of very rare people and so many people and very small place and such a big space. So I would love to understand whether you differentiate between the two places and where is the city on this whole spectrum.
That's going to go down into terminology of what you call a city and what you call a town and all that. That's always an interesting answer. But for me, from a very personal perspective, I don't look at it as one has to fit into a particular requirement, a particular box. For me, it's home. I had the pleasure and the joy of living in London. And that was home. And then I now live, as I said, just outside Oxford, where that is home. And it's that interconnection between your home, your space, your sort of kingdom, to use a phrase, to actually what is going on. The big difference here in London is the mass of people, but also the mass of facilities. I'm looking out the window here and I can not only see the Bank of England, but I can see the House of Commons, Westminster Palace, the whole mecca of London in front of me. When I look out of my own office at home, I'm looking at across the field with sheep and cows in. But they both interact at a certain level. We're here, the Mecca, the centre of London. For some people, it might be the West End. For some people, it might be the city. In my village, it's the pub and the cricket pitch. But it's all how we interact, how we come together, and how we work. The big aspect is, I would say, interaction. That interaction is what makes it a good city or makes it a bad city, whether that be public transport, public services such as broadband. That sort of interaction will make you think this is a good place to live or a bad place to live or work or commute to, visit as a tourist.
Since you are working in the infrastructure space a lot, I would also love to understand what do you mean by the term infrastructure? Because you just said very different parts of infrastructure for your current hometown suburbs of Oxford and also in London. Those have very different infrastructure. So what do you mean by the term infrastructure?
You can put some hard defined lines on what infrastructure is. Road, rail, broadband, utilities, the whole lot. But again, it's that sort of interaction level. I'm sorry to keep coming back to that, but that interaction of those facilities that are provided. I think people need to have their own personal interpretation, but they'll see the benefits. And also, then it's down to public departments, whether that be in the UK or where you are in Melbourne, especially in some of those beautiful rural areas that you've got out there. The fact that interaction will make it a popular place, either popular to visit, popular to live, popular to work. And as the population grows, I think I saw the UN figures, and they're quite scary that I think March this year, I think it was the data was about 8.2 billion people live on the planet. And by 2050, it's expected to go to 9.7 billion. And then 10.4 billion by mid-2080s. That's a growing population that needs housing, feeding, power, water, the whole lot. Those rural areas might not be so rural areas. And the one thing I'm looking at, I assume it's a global app, but things like Rightmove, I'm waiting for that property, that band, that sort of added value being on that property around the speed of your broadband. The speed of your connection, especially with so many people now working from home and the commute has dropped off. That is going to add value. So is that the same principle as now people are seeing value in data? Data is being collected. We've been collecting it for years. You've heard the phrases numerous times on how much data we've collected, the terminology of data lakes and all that. But actually, are we now starting to filter down with a stronger mindset of what data we collect and the true value we collect? And then going back to that sort of comment about Rightmove, that data has never been collected on the speed of your broadband. We've seen some great fancy adverts, but now will someone use that advert, use that data to actually add value to the property, as businesses are now adding value to their business and their P&L because of the data they have access to. I think it's been a slow process, and if you can go back to where the value of data really started outside of infrastructure, if you go back to, I think the brand over here and other brands are available is Tesco. You all now have your club card, you have your loyalty card. Those were used to collect your purchasing history, what you were collecting, why you were collecting. They saw the value in that data. Now, are people in infrastructure assets, are they seeing value in collecting data and using it responsibly to actually achieve better connection with the general populace, and therefore reevaluating what is a good area in the city, what is a bad area in the city through that connection? And that can be bus services. So do you class a bus as a part of key infrastructure? Sits on the road as the infrastructure, but is actually the bus, the transport facility, actually infrastructure, or just something that rides on the infrastructure?
It's reassuring that although you have the background of working in hard infrastructure, the roads, the utilities, the buildings, the built environment, you are bringing in people and the social connections and the interactions, as you mentioned, and also the maybe not yet tangible assets such as data. And we will get back to data in a minute. But first, we established the city, we established the infrastructure. What does the future of cities mean to you?
So that's a really difficult question to answer. As I said, the future cities, for me, it's about resilience, sustainability, and obviously digital transformation. As urban populations grow and continue to grow, we spoke about that earlier, cities must evolve to be smarter, more connected environments where infrastructure meets the needs of people efficiently and effectively. I think that's key, efficiently and effectively, especially with the issues around global warming. This means integrating things like digital twins, AI, data-driven planning to create a sustainable, livable space that are adaptable to climate change, economic shifts, or even technology advancements. As I said, that sort of change, mindset change in people's aspirations. And we've had a change for all of us in the last, 5, 6 years with COVID. That sort of adoption of digital technology, working from home, was seen very differently 6, 7 years ago compared to what it's seen as today. You have a whole generation that's grown up with that ability to work from home, where someone of my age, I think is a polite way of putting it, we haven't had those luxuries when I started my career. But also it's going to be mindful of the advantages and disadvantages we have around bringing in things like that.
You describe the future of cities as resilient, sustainable, and with digital transformation. Let's go one by one. What does resilience mean to you?
Resilience can be anything from adaptation to change, the resilient to the changing, as I said, whether that be economic or environmental change, but also the resilience to changing in work patterns, workflows. As I said, coming back to here and now and looking out that window, London has changed physically and emotionally over the last 5 years since COVID. We changed offices just after COVID to Bishopsgate. We were down on Gracechurch Street, which is 500 yards away. And the number of food stores, whether they be the big well-known Pretz to Marks and Spencer's to small independents, that has changed. Scape has changed. Therefore, being resilient to being like COVID and economic change like that is something that has to be thought about a lot more than it has in the previous aspect. But yeah, for me, that resilience is pretty easy to say environmental, but there's a greater resilience needs to be adapted. And that's, again, coming back to things like digital twins, coming back to data, being able to think, calculate, and also scope out those what possible changes could be by the use of technology.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood something. Resilience is weathering the change?
Yeah, weathering the change. But also that change, as I said, come from economics or from good old weather. And we've just done a paper on sponge cities around the aspect of change in climates. And I was absolutely aghast when I was out in your fair country at the beginning of this year in Brisbane. And some of the aspects of flooding. And then obviously I left and got back to then see some of the issues around on the Gold Coast with the weather that was caused. That 1 in 100 storm is no longer 1 in 100. With a colleague in a petrol station, and he then shows you a picture and the water is just underneath the canopy of the petrol station. That is quite So again, that mindset of planning, crisis management is another, which opens up a whole platitude of conversations around insurance, underwriting, finance, investment, which is all key. Coming back to your topic, the cities, again, using that data to circle around, actually get investment into the city. Some cities need revitalizing. Some cities need to be brought up to speed. It might be another phrase. But again, those decisions now need to be made very sensibly from a financial perspective and environmental perspective as well. So for me, that's where that data is, that vein that runs through all decision processes.
You just mentioned a phrase, crisis management for resilience.
Yes.
That is usually a short-term thinking approach to whatever we are facing, because we are in a crisis, we need to manage it. However, you are also talking about these long-term changes, such as the climate change, such as weather patterns, such as flooding and whatever. I'm curious, how do you bring the short and the long-term view together? Because I assume you do. So how can we balance out the short-term and long-term view in resilience?
Yes, totally agree. Crisis management can be short-term, but also that sort of long-term crisis planning might be a better phrase to use, needs to be sort of thought of at very early stages. The way my mind thinks, the number of stage gates that I work at when I'm involved in my day-to-day job, I start with the policies and the plans around what that possible investment and the asset and what that asset could possibly do, followed by prioritization. Is that investment required? Is it a good place to be doing that around the city? Then feasibility and preparation, funding and finance, design, procurement, construction, operations and maintenance, and then decommissioning and reuse. And why I say that, each one of those stages, you can then actually involve what I would put the word crisis management, but it might be crisis planning. You look at some of the natural disasters that have happened over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been impacted by environmental aspects, and therefore planning, God forbid, we hope it never happens, but those aspects of being prepared and being ready for it do make life, I won't say acceptable, manageable, I think is a better phrase for when they do happen. You can be better prepared. Because I thought it was quite interesting watching Brisbane, because we mentioned earlier when the storm made land, that it was seen as being a little bit less than actually what was being broadcast on the news. But I would go with the comment, being far better prepared is far better than being underprepared. So we can be advanced in our thinking and our terminology and our use of planning. It may be beneficial to the community, the city.
Keegan Huckleberry is a disaster resilience manager, planner in Christchurch, and he talked about how to prepare for disasters because New Zealand has a few disasters. He gave a really good preparation for individuals, how they can think through not yet present disasters. Thank you so much for explaining how we can think through the short-term and the long-term resilience. You also mentioned sustainability. What does sustainability mean to you?
Cities are major contributors to carbon emissions, let's be really honest. If they fail to implement a sustainable energy, mobility, construction practices, the impact of climate change can be severe. It's not something that's going away, and goes back to a couple of pieces of work I've done. The flooding, as I said, on sponge cities. I wrote a paper 18 months ago, possibly 2 years ago, on heat islands, on heat domes in North America. Also, the resource being, you're seeing now that sort of value in commodities, that scarcity of resources is becoming more and more a focus of where the next sort of mine or next sort of source material will come from for those resources. So for me, going back to your aspect again, and sticking very much around city, that planning, some of the phrases I use are, being of the age I am, we grew up with a measured twice, cut once. That was an old sort of joinery term. But now you look at what you have in the way of technology and the technology that's available to you. You can plan, design and deliver before you've even broken soil. Again, that sort of being able to use 4D, 5D products such as Synchro really does make a difference in planning out and removing those errors, removing those mistakes. And the more times you do that, the more likely you're going to be on time, on budget, which are key things. But also don't forget, mistakes cost carbon, cost materials. You do not have a level of wastage that maybe making those mistakes could costly cause.
I will poke a bit around sustainability because you mentioned that we need to sustain our systems, our infrastructures, our networks. And that's my problem with sustainability, because I don't think that sustaining is enough. I think that it prohibits progress. It prohibits development. For example, Rethink X talks about that we have the technology to solve climate change. But it will not happen if we are sticking to the current status quo, that we need to keep up this status quo. We need to keep our emissions low. We need to keep our energy consumption low, because based on research, there aren't wealthy countries with low energy consumption. So if we want to create a wealthy world for everyone, and not wealthy in the meaning of money, but in the thinking that everybody can have whatever they want, that might not happen if there is no, for example, a huge energy production, thus allowing people to consume more energy. So I'm curious whether sustaining is enough.
I think it's a step in the right direction, but I do agree with you. I think this is where cities can lead the way in decarbonisation. The adoption of green buildings. There is some fantastic architecture globally, I'd like to add, that I've seen that are absolutely amazing with that green mindset. And then you can bring in renewable energy. We're seeing a lot more of that aspect coming in. And then the circular economy principles. Reuse. My day was make, do, amend. It's sending everything to landfill is not the answer. We can reuse materials again, repurpose them. And that goes back to, again, data. Having things benchmarked, asset tagged, again, gives you the ability to see that sort of quality of the material, how often it's been maintained. Can it have an extended, forgive the phrase, but an extended shelf life? That's a real big thing. Creating a healthier urban environment for your podcast. That sort of mindset really needs to be adhered to and taken more. And going back to your comment, sustainable is good. Sustainable is the right direction, but we can go further. We can go a lot further.
And then, since you're bringing in always this thinking of data and technology and digital transformation, what does digital transformation mean to you?
What does it mean, or what is the outcome? Which would you like? The outcome is smart decisions. And that's what we're here. Too often, we're not actually looking at the outcome. And one thing I very much have the mindset around conversations of work I've been doing for over the last 4 years is the systems approach. And that systems approach, and I've been able to author and part of a number of great papers around that. And we're actually starting to see it bite. I can't believe the first paper I wrote on this was about 4 years ago. And now we're starting to see a great bite by government departments, financial organizations, and even insurance. I explained something I've been doing with an insurance company. That sort of setting out the digital roadmap, setting out that roadmap of the asset for an outcome really gives you that long-term mindset, but also gives you that outcome that you require to achieve the goals we've been talking about so far around resilience, around low carbon, about going that step further. So for me, having that sort of long-term thinking really does solve the problem.
Okay, so that's the outcome. What is digital transformation?
For me, on that transformation, it's that slow, calculated process of thinking. Going back to that digital roadmap, setting out that roadmap. What is the outcome of doing this? What is the return on doing this? So that transformation, I'll give you something to relate to. Seeing I'm in London, I was part of the Crossrail project, now Elizabeth Line. I started that project just when the iPad became available. I could see you smirking. That mindset there was basically to remove paper from the site. Something now we've taken as the norm, everything now. But back then, and that was, 2014, 2012? So yeah, we're talking just over 10 years ago. That is how far we've come. And that mindset there was being able to remove paper from site from a health and safety perspective. So that is your starting. That is digital transformation. So digital transformation can be a number of things, a number of aspects, from simply removing paper to good quality asset information, digital twins, 4D, 5D simulation. These are all little cogs, and when you put them together, you get a very good performance motor, engine, process, whatever you'd like to call it. But again, it's linking all those cogs together. One cog will turn at A speed, put multiple together, and you can lift and move far quicker and far better.
I love that you are using the term transformation instead of disruption. And at the same time, I would also love to know your opinion, because as an architect, I saw that we are switching from paper to digital drawing softwares and programs and PDFs and whatever. But the process itself, the design process itself, hasn't changed. So we are doing the same as we have been doing it 100 years ago. Has the transformation created something which is really new and innovative in the building industry?
Strong question. Yes, the easiest answer to that is yes. I started life as a quantity surveyor. So for me, it was all about costs and keeping it on time and on budget. For me, that design, through that educational process, through best practice, through leadership, through the adoption of digital transformation, we are seeing that process become smoother, quicker, faster, and therefore you look at some of the newer technology around AI, the site mapping that we're able to do, working out the best number of, let's keep it very simple, the best number of car parking spaces. That now is done in an optimized way by the software in seconds, whereas previously it was done on best judgment or done by best practice. Those technology and that sort of use of newer software, newer materials definitely does speed up the process and become a more valuable asset to the design community.
I will push back a bit because the examples you were talking about are iterations and not innovation necessary. For example, the parking issue you were mentioning, that's an improvement on the best practices, but it's not necessarily an innovation. The design process hasn't necessarily changed. It just become more efficient, being just improved. And I'm curious because I would love to believe that designers and the building industry itself is changing and can be caught up to the modern times. I'm just not sure whether that's happening. So I would be curious whether you see transformation, not just iterative changes, but transformation.
Yeah, I would push back on your pushback because you can go down really into the weeds. This could fill the next hour. But not only are the design processes becoming more iterative and changing, but the use of materials. If you want to go down, the use of mixture of the rebirth of the use of timber, laminated timber, for bridges, for buildings, from an environmental perspective, the use. That to me is innovative. TV shows, global TV shows, because I have been watching yours, grand designs on that reuse. And you look at some of them, I would like to add, they are using new materials, new leadership, new best practice to give rebirth to an existing asset, sometimes in the city, sometimes out in the city. So, yeah, I would push back and say, yeah, there is changes. And that changes has a very broad brush from that mindset of reuse of materials, new ways of thinking.
And I completely accept your pushback because we are getting to the digital twin question. And when digital twins are used properly, that's true transformation in the design industry and the building industry, in my experience. So, what is a digital twin, according to you?
Digital twin is you have an industry reference. Digital twin is a digital representation of an asset which has live data. There's always a debate over what is live data. What is it? Something that's updated on a minute-by-minute basis or something that's updated on a monthly, 6-monthly or yearly basis. That really depends on the asset and the requirements of that updating data. So for me, that is, as you say, it's an essential part of any asset, vertical or linear, from its inception, day one, going back to those stage gates of the influx of information that's coming around. Going back to my comments earlier of the cogs, you take a digital twin with a good CDE with 4D, 5D simulation, all these cogs come down, and then a good asset management system once it's been delivered. All these reference points produce a very high performing quality of data, mindset, insight, leadership, whichever phrase you want to call. We're also seeing the influence and impact that's coming from financial markets, insurance markets around their knowledge, around their understanding of digital twins from a de-risking aspect as well. The ripple and the waves are now definitely starting to spread out from understanding.
Thank you for the description, because now we can get to the very interesting conversation or question onto data versus information versus knowledge, because it's not interchangeable, even from your answers. And I would love to understand what is your differentiation of these items, let's put it that way, and how we can have data, information, and knowledge.
Reaching for a phone here, because I'll send you this. It's a fantastic image that one uses. Have you seen it where it's data is all sort of the mixed up bit? Then you have the analytics, and then you have the decision. It's a well-known image that knocks around. And that's where it comes from. For me, you have all that data flow around. We spoke about earlier, the data lakes, collected so much data, et cetera, et cetera. Then doing the analytics aspect actually starts to bring it together. Then the decision process made on that analytical work then gives us the good insights. I've just been working with, and I know you're going to interview soon, Alison Watson. I've been working with the Chartered Institute of Civil Engineering Surveyors here in the UK about the new role of a digital surveyor. So that digital surveyor will actually have data as the core role. That's a role that is emerging and has come through the last couple of years. There's a need for it. So as we rely more on that data and that digital service, the more we need to understand that data we've collected. And I think this is where, as I said earlier, we're seeing finance industry, we're seeing the insurance industry now looking at making investments. They always have grown up making decisions on investments on insights and data and decision processes. They're becoming more and more reliant on the information the asset owners have around long-term investments.
In the financial industry, there is always the saying that past performance doesn't mean anything for the future. And I would love to understand how we can use data to create better future for cities.
There's so many rabbit holes you could dive down there. Let's keep it cities and let's maybe go down one particular rabbit hole. As I said on that paper I've just done on sponge cities, which is really insightful. Australia has had its flooding, North America's had its flooding, Europe has had its flooding, even the UK has had its flooding. But now using new ways of managing that flooding, creating those sponge cities, creating those areas around those particular outcomes actually produces, I won't say a safer environment, but more managed environment. So therefore creating runoff, common phrase over here is a SUD, that basically lets the water run into a culvert, I think might be the phrase, and then away from residential areas. So you actually have areas within inside the city that are planned to be flooded. The one that springs to mind and was very prevalent, but caught my eye on writing the paper, was there was a marshy area and a park, so to speak, typical swing, slides, the whole lot. That sort of was designed actually, should there be a flood of a certain size, would actually fill with water and therefore move away from the residential areas, protecting the residential areas. So that sort of thought and process and long-term thinking can actually, going back to our earlier conversation of outcomes, that resilience planning inside with a good, strong outcome at the beginning of perception of a city can actually create a very first comment. What is a city? A home that's safer and more attractable for people to live in and work in.
All of this talk about digital twins and digital transformation, data and information. What does technology mean to you?
For me, technology is, we live and breathe it now. It's in our offices. As I said, I stopped being a QS and moving over to being in the technology industry on Crossrail. That was a very informative and innovative period of time. The iPad and that sort of adoption of technology. If I'd said to my younger self in the 90s that people would be sleeping outside a phone shop to get the latest phone, I don't think I'd have believed myself. That sort of adoption and desire, those facilities now, is just unbelievable for the younger me to believe as older me. So again, going back, that sort of innovation and strive, I think is really the sort of technology aspect we need to get hold of. It's been resonating in my mind, a comment you said earlier about the design processes. Have they really changed? phrase I used a couple of years ago when we did one of the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Summits in Singapore. It's never left me. And the phrase is the magic we're looking for in the work we're avoiding. Just take a second on that. You said we have all these new skills, we have all this new technology, we have all this new innovation, but we haven't moved on. Maybe misplacing your quote, but hopefully the sentiment is right. Why haven't we moved forward? We're looking for this magic. We're looking for this change. We're looking for this sort of, whether it be from an environmental perspective to a financial perspective to a resilience perspective. If we have all these tools available to us, why haven't we moved forward? So is that magic that we're looking for in the work we're avoiding?
Do you have an answer to that question?
I'd love to hear your answer as the next generation of someone looking back.
I think that this is partially a learned helplessness, that people want to do better, but they see the outside world and feel that, oh, nobody is doing it, so I can't do it. That's one thing. Then I think that we don't talk to each other enough. That, oh, you are doing that, then we should collaborate because that could work together really well and then we could do so much more. And also, there are so many myths regarding the better solutions. When we talk about renewable energies, it's still that, oh, it's so much more expensive than the existing ones. No, it's not anymore. It's so much more cheaper than firing up a coal power plant or whatever. And we haven't learned to think long-term, I think. I think that's missing from the common knowledge that we can think long-term. We don't need to think in 3 years or 4 years as the political cycles go. But we could think through 50 years or something like that. And I think that's missing.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I think a lot of the projects are short-termism mindset. And I think it is that sort of, I have lots of these sort of quick soundbite phrases, but we've got to start making the projects shovel-worthy, not shovel-ready. Just because it is ready, we're going to site because we can get the photograph of the soil being broken, cutting of the ribbon, so to speak. We are taking action. The advantages of just maybe having an outcome process, just thinking it through and actually achieving what we want to achieve and running those data models, those digital twin models, that 4D, 5D aspect actually will give us a better outcome. But there is that rush. And also innovation, as I said, was part of Crossrail, which was known as Innovate 18. It really helped drive that innovation. It'd be good to see more of that, not just on the mega projects, but on the medium-sized projects, that sort of ability to drive adoption. Because the big thing, you've grown up and grown used to having, whether it be an iPhone or an Android. If I take that away from you, you're going to feel something very important has been taken away from your life. Now, if I drive digital into a project and you work on that project, short-term project, not a 10-year project, but a 2 or 3 year project, you'll have grown used to it in that period of time. You go to the next project and you don't have it. That is something that's going to be missed. That's something you're going to ask for, whether it be on productivity, whether it be on health and safety. Therefore, that drives adoption. Adoption drives the market. The market drives its own forward. So that is how, by being sensible and by moving things forward, we can actually drive to a better place.
One more thing I would add, which is, I think, missing, is the conscious acknowledgement that cities are evolving and we can change the evolution. So I always say we need to do urban conscious evolution because we can create better futures.
Totally agree with you. Yes, I can do the very holistic, but I want to do things that people resonate with people's minds. Simply now, we're moving to electric vehicles. It's great. Not everybody has a driveway, so those cars need charging. How do we charge it? We can go through some charging points that we see on the road. That's great. Or we can incorporate it with existing, with the plugging in into lampposts and all that type of stuff. There is innovation there. But then think about your Amazon driver. We've all got so used to working from home that deliveries are coming in left and center. When you've got a road in a city that has got parking on both sides of vehicles charging, How does the Amazon delivery or the food delivery achieve a parking space to actually then drop the parcels off? Again, this is where that, as I said, we have to have some thinking around how we all interact around that and that sort of aspect of picking up your comment there about planning out carefully.
And just throwing in other food for thought regarding this delivery pack. In the States, Texas allowed drone delivery to zipline. So people are already immediately ordering everything by drones. And based on the comments, they will never go back. It's this hedonistic adaptation which you are talking about regarding the technology being there and making our life more comfortable. You have been touching upon these, but I would love to know what are the 3 biggest fears or concerns regarding the future of cities for you?
I think the number one is aging infrastructure, the resilience risks around that. Many cities rely on outdated infrastructure that isn't prepared for climate change. Again, we said right at the beginning, rising populations or extreme weather events, they're just not there because they were never planned to be there. And the risk of catastrophic failures increases if the cities don't modernise. So that's my number one. I think I'm going to go something like number 2, something you said earlier, the data silos and the digital divide. They're not sharing. While digital solutions can transform urban planning, many cities struggle with fragmented data systems, and there's a growing gap between digital advancement and underdeveloped regions. And without proper integration, cities risk inefficiency and, more importantly, inequality growth. And that's, we talked about earlier about parts of cities needing to be reborn or revitalized. I think 3, and these are not in order of priority, the sustainability and climate crisis. That's not going to go away. Cities are major contributors to carbon emissions, and we need to start thinking about how we involve, whether it be a light tram system in the mobility aspect. It's far cheaper than tunneling everywhere. Also, the greener buildings.
And then, since we have been also talking about some opportunities, what are the 3 biggest opportunities regarding the future of cities for you?
Obviously, I'm going to go with number 1 because I've been talking about it. The digital twin, smart infrastructure. Be rude of me not to. The adoption of a digital twin, we said, allows for real-time monitoring, predictive analytics, leading better decision-making process, reduce city costs, better city management. The list goes on and on. For me, that's it. Second on mind would be sustainable, net zero design. I mean, I'd like to add in there. Cities can be led in a way in decarbonisation by adopting, we spoke earlier, green buildings, renewable energy, circular economy. It goes on and on. We've spoken about this. That would be it. And automation for efficiency. That would be another one. AI solutions optimize, talking here traffic flow, also construction projects, reducing waste, improving service delivery. Those type of aspects really need to come into play.
And then what are the 3 biggest strengths regarding the future of cities?
Innovation, technology adoption. We'll go with those. Cities are becoming hubs of technology advancement. That's the thing. Rapidly integration of IoT, AI, automation to solve complex urban challenges. It is ripe for being places. High levels of population give you the greatest efficiency, the greatest change, the greatest reward for that change. Again, collaboration and data-driven governance. More cities are adopting open data policies, collaborative models, allowing governments, businesses, communities to create smarter solutions. Again, I sound like a broken record, but that resilience and adoption, that's a big strength. Urban environments have this history of evolving in response to crisis. We're talking about crisis management, from pandemics to climate shocks, the whole lot, providing that ability to move on and rebuild. You just look from grey London, from the 1940s onwards, cities have evolved, this one in particular.
It's so reassuring that you said collaboration as a strength, because for me, strengths mean something which is already there and we can build upon, while opportunities are something, for me, which can happen in the future, or we can make them happen in the future. So the thing that you mentioned, collaboration as a strength, it's just so reassuring.
Absolutely. I can give you a great example, one that sticks to mind. And again, the Brisbane aspect. That was going there and spending time at Crossrail team, fantastic team. And I'm going to talk about some of the innovation aspects here and leave the major project to one side. One of the things the Crossrail team left London, went out there and engaged with them was some of the things that we felt we could have done better. And going back subsequently, a number of years later, that sort of experience centre, starting off with just something that was around the project, around interaction with the project and with people in the city. It was a great starting place. New technology was available in 2018, 2019, 2020 when it started off. So now going back to seeing this is no longer the Cross River Rail Experience Centre, it's the Brisbane Experience Centre. Having a digital twin from a First Nation mindset is absolutely unbelievable as a visitor to watch. But also now seeing what's coming out of the Olympics, what's going in, where they are, what the changes are in the city with the new stadiums, what the stadiums will be coming after the Olympics. That's a great resource as a city to bring in investment and bring in new blood, new money into a city. It's a fantastic investment. And then the final thing for me, and actually was the most enjoyable, what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to achieve, was actually being in that experience centre and seeing a classroom full of kids appear and go in there. And they were there interacting with the facilities. I'm sure the next generation of kids have some sort of special power because they were able to pick up the Xbox controller, fly through the city, and I'm trying to figure out where I am in the city. And they were flying around it. Absolutely unbelievable. But that is how we get over the skills issue. We all know globally the construction industry has a major skills issue. When you interview Alison, I'll let Alison talk about this. But we've got to have something that incentivizes the next generation to come in. And we need joiners, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need those core people. But we also need those digital people, giving them that taste at a very young age of what may be deemed as a non-traditional construction skill set is going to help fill that gap. And more importantly, is going to drive our industry forward. Those aspects of being able to see what the outcome is, see what the future is, see what they can interact with, that gives us a rising demand to be in that role.
Are you optimistic about the future?
Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't get out of bed. My short period of time compared to others in this industry, I've seen some major advancements. The big thing of working for Bentley, we have this award every year, a year in infrastructure, and 200, 300, 400 applications come in every year of what I would call lighthouse excellent projects, and being able to sit and sift through. And the numbers are growing every year of people putting these projects forwards, year on year, and sitting there, listening to them and seeing them. I think that you find it hard to be not proud of our industry and how it's moving forward. So yes, we can move quicker, we can move better, we can do the magic that we're looking for. But you know what? It's not all doom and gloom. We are actually seeing rays of sunshine coming through the clouds.
Thank you so much for bringing this positive outlook on the building industry, because we need that. Mark, you have been very generous with your time and answers. What is your role in establishing the future of cities?
The day job is I lead a fantastic team called the Infrastructure Policy Advancement Team. We are a small business unit within Bentley Systems. I think the easiest way to categorize us is an in-house think tank. So we are looking for those best practices, those lighthouse projects, and to understand how those achievements have been made, those wins have been made, those gains have been made. We work very heavily cross-sector, from government departments to financiers to insurance companies, looking at best ways to solve problems, taking those lighthouse projects that may have solved them and writing about them, discussing them. We have an upcoming event in Australia, actually, the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Summit, which will be in Melbourne. I hope to see you at that event. Basically, we will be gathering 200 people to talk about best practices. We've been running this program now for 5-6 years, London, Manchester, Singapore, Toronto. This year we're doing it in New York, Melbourne as well. Is really about the core basis of my business team unit is to drive best practice into industry. Make it the norm, make it the acceptable level of me taking away your digital phone from you and you desiring it going forward. For me, I suppose it really is one of the reasons why I drive this forward. I love history. I love learning from the past. But also one of the reasons why I got into all this. I have a young 14-year-old daughter who just wants to get into the industry. I just want to make it easier. And hence why I work with great people like Alison Watson to make it easier. To get that sort of spirit and passion that so many of us have in our industry. If we can make it easier and more engaging that they want to participate in it, we can build great cities. We can build a great environment for people to live, learn and play.
And please keep up this good work because we need those lighthouse projects and we need the information about those lighthouse projects. And also bringing up the next generation to create a better future for cities while they enjoy the industry itself is freaking important. Mark, do you have any closing comments or requests for the audience?
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And great to see you again and keep up these podcasts. I really do enjoy them. It's a real pleasure to listen and hear people's perspectives on what they're also trying to achieve. And if we can all collaborate together, we can achieve a lot more.
Thank you so much, Mark.
It was really interesting to hear from Mark about his description of the next generation needing to be involved, not to mention his advocacy for infrastructure development. Hayden Reed talked about smart infrastructure in episode 260. You can find out more about Mark online, all the links are in the show notes. What was the most interesting part for you? What questions did arise regarding Mark's approach to the future of cities? What have you learned from this interview? Let me know on Twitter at WTF4Cities or on the WTF4Cities.com website where the transcripts and show notes are available. You can also subscribe on the website not to miss any new episodes and leave some feedback. I hope this was an interesting interview for you as well, and thanks for tuning in.
What is the Future for Cities podcast?